Today, I'm joined by Alvin Kressler, CEO and Executive Director at the CMT Association. Alvin, thank you so much for joining us on the Association Marketing Show.
Thanks, Alvin. Great to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. So I always like to start with asking our guests about their personal and professional background and how they entered the wonderful world of associations, I like to call it, and what your role today is.
So, for me, my career started a while ago. I was actually right out of college in the military for a few years, and then came back, did graduate work, and went into financial services. And I kind of found my way into the association world first as a member of Professional Association for Analysts and Portfolio Managers, CFA Institute. And I worked, a number of years in industry as an analyst and in various roles, and then managing teams. And kind of in the early 2000s, I was actually at one of the big financial service firms, and kind of looking around, and got reached out to by a board member who was on the board of CFA New York at the time. It had a different name. Gotcha. And they were looking for a new executive director, CEO. And I was a member, but he said, look, you've been running this other small group here, and we really need to kind of do some changes here. And we want to have somebody who's not just a member or, has a background in financial services, but actually has run organization. And so I joined them, and then we're there for about 4 years and went back into industry. And, as circumstance happened, a friend of mine called me up and said, hey, this other group you've been a member of is looking for a new executive director and CEO. Mm-hmm. Would you consider moving back into the association world and kind of, running that organization? And interestingly enough, it was a smaller organization than CFA New York in terms of just overall budget, but it had a bigger mandate. We're a global organization in terms of credentialing. So the CMT Association, Chartered Market Technicians Association, we actually run a credential for analysts and portfolio managers and traders around technical analysis, using technical analysis in their investment process. That's now about 4.5 years ago that happened, that I came back into the association world. In the business world, it's fairly clear that your motive is to generate profit, right? And generate income and
straightforward,
profit.
Right.
And you try and figure out goods and services that the market wants, and you drive those into the marketplace. In the association world, sometimes it gets flipped on its head, and you kind of have to you go from the standpoint of sometimes you still want to generate a positive income because that keeps the organization going forward, because if you just continually use the balance sheet, at some point you don't have a balance sheet left.
Right.
But there are times when the profit motive or the profit driver is secondary or third on the list of what you're trying to do. But you still, as the person running the organization, have to keep an eye on how much of that you're doing and eating into. I guess in some regards, I came into the association world a little differently in that I spent a fair amount of time in the for-profit sector, but I don't think that's so much unique anymore. Maybe 10 years ago that was unique.
Yeah.
Today, I think that you see that more and more. And I would say in many instances, it's more challenging running an association than running a for-profit business because of the non-profit driven motives for delivering a service.
Right. It's a more complicated formula that you have to try to manage on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. Could you briefly describe CMT Association? You did as part of the intro, but like the main lineup of goods and services that you provide to your members and kind of the history of the organization?
So I like to say we're a 50-year-old startup, in that it's only been in the last 10 years or so the organization has really kind of looked at itself as a business. It had been more about a membership and an association up until that time. Now, our two main areas of kind of product and services, obviously a traditional membership association,
right?
And our members are financial professionals. It's not an association for individuals who are just interested in technical analysis,
right?
Although we do provide some of our programming gears to that so that there's a knowledge base that gets out into the public, that the skills aren't kind of misunderstood or misused, because it can be dangerous. It's somebody says, if you just show somebody, give them a book, it's kind of like laying a loaded gun. If there's no context around it.
Totally.
So the organization really started as a membership association and then developed and said, we really should put a framework around what defines a professional technical analyst. And so they developed, years ago, started to develop the body of knowledge in the curriculum, and that's where we do it. And so our business is kind of almost evenly divided at the moment, a little heavier to the credentialing side in terms of just how that business develops.
Yeah.
And then from that, it's a 3-part exam. It takes about 18 months if you go fully through it. We give all 3 levels of the exam 3 times a year.
Okay.
So if you're successful and you pass all 3 levels, then you would apply to become a full member and use the charter. You have to be a full member to use the charter, so you have to be a member in good standing. It's part of, in some regards, I hate to say policing, but it's about making sure that the individuals who say they are charter holders are maintaining their continuing ed. We don't have an explicit number of hours, but every year our members sign an annual disclosure statement that says that they're maintaining proficiency, because our skill set can be applied in so many different parts of the market. Yeah. It's hard to say you need 10 hours here and 10 hours there, because in some people, they actually need 2 hours in category A, and they really need 18 hours in category B, because that's how their market and where they play is developing.
Right.
So that's really what we do. And obviously there's other pieces around what we call membership value. That is really continuing ed programming for our members. And we make that available to the public at large in many instances, so that it's not just contained, so that anybody can come in and listen in and utilize that knowledge and hear from those experts.
Gotcha.
But again, those are the 2 primary. Perfect. We're a very small staff with a global mandate. I have 8 full-time employees, including myself globally. There are probably another 5 on and off part-time employees. Okay. And then there are 100 to 150 volunteers who consistently work with us, helping us put on chapter events around the globe. And so, we do leverage, that. And then we leverage a lot of vendor relations, whether it's on the technology front or on the marketing front and deliverables of marketing, using platforms rather than developing everything in-house.
Like that can be a superpower if that's done well, or it can be kind of an unmitigated disaster if it's not done well, in terms of kind of outsourcing key components of your organization's work to vendors, right? So it seems like that you have found a way to do that pretty successfully, that you have, at least a handful, if not a large amount, of really successful vendor relationships. I know we've been working together for a little while, Feather and CMT Association, but I know that you work with many other vendors. What advice would you give to other association leaders or association executives in terms of creating vendor relationships that are actually successful and fruitful long-term, as opposed to being like expensive experiments or wastes of time, which I've also seen?
Yeah, I think the key is having a really open and transparent dialogue with the vendor, letting them know what you're trying to gain from the relationship and how they can gain from the relationship. And obviously the relationship for them is in many instances, you're a customer and you're a part of their revenue stream. But if they have a really good understanding of what you're trying to gain, it also helps them focus their service. If they have 6 products, but the reality is you really only you're only going to be able to capture use and utilize 2 of those products. Having a very clear relationship and transparency with that vendor about, hey, look, I know we could have access to all 6 of your products with the way our relationship is structured, but the reality is we need to focus on these 2. And the other thing that I think also helps is with all of our vendors, we have really regular check-ins. A couple of our vendors that are our very key vendors in delivering the test and the curriculum, those vendors are at different times of the year weekly check-ins, if not bi-weekly check-ins. And in the slow periods of the year, their bi-monthly check-ins. So,
Yeah.
it's never, we don't allow that relationship to ever go 30 or 45 days without a touch point.
Yeah.
And I think the part of that is I think about them as just an extension of our employees,
Yeah.
right? The product manager or the project manager that we have with each of those vendors, I think of them as part of our employee group. They're working for us. They're our direct interface into the vendor relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really want to have that. And so what's really great about, doing in the high intensity periods when we're doing weekly or bi-weekly check-ins, the consistent people on the call are, the team from CMT Association who's working on that,
mm-hmm.
and the product manager at the vendor.
Mm-hmm.
But the product manager at the vendor is bringing in different experts for each of those meetings
according
to help
what's
us
appropriate,
navigate delivery.
That's perfect.
So
I love that.
anytime a relationship is broken down, you can almost always track it down to, at some point you stop the check-ins, or the check-ins slowed to where they weren't frequent enough
Yeah.
that both parties knew or understood what was being worked on or what was needed.